Hello my friends.
We are very glad to see you all again.
Blizzard has finally decided to give us a substantial reward for 1000 wins in the competitive game mode. This is incredible, but how will you get a new portrait for your beloved hero, if most meta decks are very expensive? Also, the Uldum meta has become even more expensive than it was before.
This is a disaster.
In light of this news, we have decided to show you the top 10 most effective budget-friendly decks. To do this, we analyzed a guide from Hearthstonetopdecks, then added statistics from different meta sources. Based on these data, we determined the best decks for you.
In any case, you should understand that most of these budget decks are used by players from rank 25 to 15. It is at these ranks that the decks are the most effective.
As you get closer to rank 10, the effectiveness of these decks will decrease. Despite this, these decks will definitely help you to climb the ladder, expand your pool of decks, have fun, or at least do some daily quests.
The 10th place is occupied by Warrior, and this is not a surprise for us. The Warrior has never been the easiest class to build a budget deck.
The decks of Saviors of Uldum meta are no exception. All warrior archetypes rely on a large number of epic and legendary cards, which makes it impossible to build budget versions of decks. Aggro Warrior is the only deck that has some budget options, if 6220 dust can even be called budget.
Actually, we managed to find several cheaper versions, but they were not quite viable, and had too little efficiency when we tested them.
The current version of the deck has a win rate of about 52%. Tempo Warrior looks quite promising at the moment, as it has a favorable matchup against Combo Priest, which is the current top deck in the meta.
In 9th place is Mage.
Mage had viable tempo decks built around secrets in many metas thanks to multiple synergies.
But only 0.5% of players use secret Mage archetype.
This version costs only 1680 dust. According to HS replay statistics, 5000 players have used this budget version of the deck in the last week. The deck is quite close to the full meta version, although there are some minor changes that would make it better. For example, you can add Stargazer Luna, Bloodmage Thalnos, Pyroblast or Puzzle Box of Yogg Saron.
But even the full meta deck is not very strong right now. Overall, this archetype only has a 46% win rate.
It's time to talk about Zoo Warlock. Zoo Warlock is an archetype that dates back to the early days of Hearthstone. This archetype has always revolved around low-cost minions.
This archetype has 3% popularity and a 53% win rate. Our version of the deck will cost you only 1240 dust, if you have Snip Snap in your collection.
This card makes a lot of budget decks stronger. Most players have Snip Snap since it was given out for free just a month before Saviors of Uldum launched. However, if you are a new player or just came back after a long break, you can easily replace this card with any other since it is not a core card. Saviors of Uldum has introduced quite a lot of new Zoo Warlock tools, and luckily, most of them are cheap. You can also add more expensive options to this version, such as Leroy Jenkins, Diseased Vulture or Dark Pharaoh Tekkan.
Next in line is Priest. Combo Priest is one of the oldest combo decks. Some kind of Combo Priest was present in nearly every meta.
At the moment, this is one of the best decks in the Uldum meta. This archetype has more than 8% popularity. Since most of the key cards in Combo Priest are free common and rare cards, it's very easy to make a cheap deck around them, so it's usually a great option for budget players. Saviors of Uldum in particular has brought a bunch of great cards to the build. However, while some of them made it to the budget decks, other great additions are more expensive, such as Psychopomp or High Priest Amit. If you own some of them, you can easily make yourself a Tier 1 meta deck.
But even without them, it's still a solid option, and one of the best budget decks available in Uldum.
In 6th place is a Rogue deck. Tempo Rogue is one of the most popular decks in the Year of the Dragon. During Rise of Shadows, the class was so strong that it has been nerfed 3 times. Even after a big chunk of the deck got hit, strong new builds keep popping up. The situation hasn't changed much in Saviors of Uldum, but all of these changes significantly weakened the class.
Now the only effective archetype is Tempo Rogue, which has become even more aggressive than before. Today this archetype has 3% popularity and a win rate of 51%.
The cost of our version is 1440 dust. The budget version of this rogue deck is not very far off from the real deal gameplay-wise. However, you're missing some important epics and legendaries such as Leroy Jenkins, Myris Unstable Element, Waggle Pick and Edwin Van Cleef.
Still, this version should work okay, until you can build the actual deck.
Oh, do you hear that? What is that sound?
Dora, this is our Bellringer Sentry. He personally notifies each of our subscribers about the release of a new video.
Wonder if I could pick my teeth with...
If you want this Worgen to visit you with a bell, first subscribe to the channel, and then click on the bell icon.
Attention, we do not accept liability for bites and other damage that you may receive during the notification.
Delicious.
Another very old strategy is Token Druid. This deck was always one of the better, and cheaper options for Druid.
Druid could always take advantage of wide boards thanks to the power of the Wild and Savage Roar, and most of expansions feature some ways to flood it too. The goal is to produce a solid board, have some minions survive to your turn, and then buff them. Our budget version of the deck is basically a full-fledged version. The only card you can add is Snip Snap.
In 4th place is Bomb Hunter. Bomb Hunter appeared after the release of the Boomsday project a year ago, but it only got popular in Rise of Shadows.
This archetype has 2% popularity. Unlike a classic Face Hunter build, Bomb Hunter heavily relies on the board to deal damage. You can't just charge into your opponent's face every turn, you want to stick a mech and then keep magnetizing onto it to deal more and more damage.
The win rate of this deck is almost 56%. This archetype didn't really get anything new in Saviors of Uldum, but it's still a solid deck and a strong budget option.
You can also add Ziliax and Leroy Jenkins to this deck to get more power.
We put Whizzbang the Wonderful in 3rd place. This card is still very popular with many players, and is a good option for a budget game.
This card will give you access to any of Blizzard's pre-made decks. It'll give them to you at random, but you'll be able to play with and test far more cards than you otherwise would. There are some disadvantages to the card. You don't get to choose the deck you get to play, and it will take longer for you to learn how to play any particular deck due to the random nature of the card. Unfortunately, Whizzbang the Wonderful's decks vary in power level, but some of them are actually solid from a competitive standpoint.
Actually, it's unclear as of yet what will happen when the standard format rotation comes around.
But we hope Blizzard see the value of Whizzbang, and either moves him to Classic, or at least releases an equivalent version.
However, it is a good option if you like the variety and the fun of playing multiple different decks you wouldn't normally have access to.
Merlok Paladin has 3% popularity. This is an aggressive deck that revolves around the Merlok tribal synergy to close out the game.
With the Saviors of Uldum expansion, Merlok Paladin got a new tool in the form of Tip the Scales. This 8-cost card can be played to draw and summon 7 Murlocs from your deck. Often, Merlok Paladin makes use of Prismatic Lens to reduce the cost of Tip the Scales and cast it earlier. The main saving grace for the Merlok Paladin is its ability to close out games fast. This is an important factor in deciding the deck's success on the ladder.
We want to show you the version of the deck that I use. It costs 3,320 dust and has a win rate of 58%. This is the most expensive deck on our list, since 3 epic cards are used here.
But it's worth it. You can also add Zephyrs the Great, Leroy Jenkins, Chef Nomi or Nightmare Amalgam. All of these cards will further increase your win rate at high ranks.
And finally, the best budget deck belongs to Shaman. Merlok Shaman is an aggressive form of Shaman that relies on the Merlok tribal synergy.
The cost of the deck is 2,220 dust, and its average win rate is 57%. This budget version is not very far off from the real deal gameplay-wise. However, you're missing some cards such as Leroy Jenkins, Nightmare Amalgam and Scargle. Still, this version is incredibly popular among players. According to HS Replay statistics, 15,000 players in the last week have used this version.
Can you draw some conclusions? Will all players be able to get the new hero portraits?
Thank you for the question. Here are some conclusions. Despite the fact that the Year of the Dragon is getting more expensive, new players and free-to-play players have an extensive selection of very effective meta decks.
In addition, compared with last year, they have become more effective.
But there are several drawbacks. All of these decks have the same play style. They are all aggressive.
In addition, almost all of these archetypes are very old. You will definitely have to spend more time in the game or make a purchase to collect enough resources for more interesting decks.
But in any case, we are glad that players have the opportunity to get a lot of effective decks for very cheap.
This shows that you have the opportunity to get new portraits for your characters, though it may take a bit more time for you than other players.
Finally, we want to ask you a traditional question. Do you use budget decks?
We created a YouTube poll. Find the button on the screen, please vote. Also, let us know what your favorite budget deck is for laddering, and share the codes of decks in the comments.
Alright, that's all for today. Thank you for being with us.
And special thanks to Chris for text editing.
We will meet in new videos.
Good luck.